Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Rogue Eye Entertainment Podcast. My name is Alex Schlerf, and I'm just going to say in advance, this is not going to be as streamlined, formatted episode as I usually do, as professional, as, consistent through the way throughout. Honestly, I just saw Kraven the Hunter, as you can see in the title, and I literally like an hour ago, I literally am recording this right. I got back from the theater and turned on the mic because I just need to rant about this movie, everything about it, Sony in general, and I just needed to get a platform to do it. And I turned on, I haven't even barely even thought about the movie overall. I'm just gonna go spitballing here and giving you guys my thoughts and what experience this was seeing in the theater. There's gonna be spoilers sprinkled throughout this movie. I mean, you don't need to go see this movie. Like I promise you. Listen, if you're like me, you want to be caught in the loop, then go see it. I mean, by all means, and maybe you'll like it more than I did, but you don't need to see this movie. So spoilers throughout, but none of this. Most of the movie you can already get from the trailers anyway. So I'm not going to be giving any huge spoilers or anything, but I'll say it before I say a spoiler. But again, if you want to go see this movie, you don't want to be spoiled. Probably just come back and listen to this after. But yeah, Kraven the Hunter. So just to give a bit of context for people who don't know, people who do not know the context of where Craven and Spider-Man and all this fits in, right? So right now, currently, Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man and its extended characters. But Spider-Man is able to appear in the MCU and in MCU crossover films because of a deal that Marvel and Sony made. I think it was right before Infinity War came out, or right before Civil War came out, I think. And that is why you see him in those movies. But when you go see a Spider-Man standalone film or see a, Craven Morbius Madam Web, it is a mostly Sony promoted movie because Sony is the one who owns the rights. But on Spider-Man movies and when he's in MCU movies, Marvel Studios is really taking the helm. But then in these extended universe films like Morbius, Craven, Madam Web, all the Venom movies, those are all Sony. It says association with Marvel. Marvel is only involved with the fact that the characters are under the Marvel brand. Okay. Marvel is not Kevin Feige's not making notes on these films. Like I know he's friends with David Pascal, but he's not making notes in these films. This is all Sony making these. It's the directors, the writers, whoever they choose. And when they make the Spider-Man standalone films, it's supposed to be 50-50 between Marvel and Sony, but it's obvious Marvel takes more of the wheel because the movies are actually good, at least for the most part. So a movie like Craven is following in the same line as these previous villain movies, right? So the Morbiuses, the Madam Webs, all the Venom films, and I think this is going to be it, but they are all Sony. They are Sony Marvel characters, but Sony is the one producing, hiring people, hiring actors, writers, directors, writing the script, all that stuff. Like it's all Sony. So I just want to get that out there because that's probably gonna be a common misconception. People are gonna say, "Oh, Craven was terrible. Marvel's falling off, stuff like that. They're desperate, whatever." Like this movie being as terrible as it is not anything to do with Marvel. I just want to get that out of the way first. So the reality with Craven is that I'm more angry after watching it than anything else because, and I'm not saying I went into this movie expecting anything. Like I really didn't. It looks better than all the other of these movies going into it, like going into seeing Morbius and going into seeing Madam Web and going to see each of the Venom movies. I think I had higher expectations for this more than anything else because I thought the trailer looked fine. The cast is stacked. I mean, you have Russell Crowe and Aaron Taylor Johnson, among many others. It's a stacked cast, but um, so I went into it thinking that it would be still not great, but at least better than these other movies where a Morbius and a Madam Web, I both gave half stars. Morbius is probably the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. Madam Web is at the bottom of my list for the movies I've seen this year. So I went into this, I think Aaron Taylor Johnson I thought looked good in the trailer. I think he could play the role well. You got a good cast. Apparently Sony was happy with this film because they hired the director to work on a non-superhero movie in the future. What's his name? The director. JC Chandor. So I was like, you know what? I think it'll be fine. And even when these Rotten Tomatoes reviews came out saying, it started like a 9%, I think it's sitting at like a 15 right now or something, and Letterboxd reviews are terrible as well. I went into it thinking, maybe it'll just be fun. It'll be a fun time. It won't be good, but it'll be fun. This movie's terrible. It's awful. It is awful, and it is continuing the classic trend that Sony is on right now of making these villain-led movies, turning them into heroes, and then trying to somehow connect them to Spider-Man in some way. Spider-Man doesn't appear to any of these films. They have made what is this, six movie? I mean, it's Morbius, Madam Web, Kraven, and then three Venom movies. So six movies starring villains of Spider-Man, very popular villains of Spider-Man. I wouldn't say Kraven is up there with like Doc Ock, Green Goblin, but especially since the Spider-Man game came out last year, people know Kraven. They can see him and notice that he is a notable Spider-Man villain. But they've made all these movies, and again, this is just so like I'm out of place. I'm gonna go all over the place with this, but just that's how it is with this movie and how quick I'm filming this. But they're making these movies where the villain, so like these are clear villains, right? Like if you have picked up a single comic, Venom, Morbius, maybe not Madam Web, but she is kind of a villain, and especially Craven. These are villains of Spider-Man. These are bad people with bad intentions, right? That's how this is, all right? And I know they did a little different thing about Venom, like they try to make him a different character and trying to focus on that bond, whatever. But Raven is a villain. He is a villain. He is not this guy who like is only doing this because he has to. He's a villain. And in this movie, he's not a villain. And it's the same as every single movie they've made. Maybe just set the Venom movies aside because they're just like I don't even know what to say about them. But maybe set them aside. But Morbius, Madame Web, and Craven are the exact same in the sense that throughout the movie, those three characters are not villains. Morbius, a kind of, but they're not villains throughout the movie. And then at the end, they do something or something happens to them where they become this villain. And I'm assuming it was meant to set up a Sinister Six thing, which was rumored in the past, which I think is dead now. I mean, reports came out this week that Craven is Sony's last spin-off movie at all. So I think that whole Sinister Six thing is dead. But watching these movies and thinking about it on the car ride back, I think that's clearly what they were setting up because, all right, just quick spoiler for Craven right here, if you care. The entire movie, he's not a villain. He's not even an anti-hero. He's a hero. He is the hero of the story. He's a normal guy. He's not crazy. Calypso in the movie calls him a lunatic, but he's not. He's a normal person, has normal conversations with people, and he's not a villain. He is maybe a bit aggressive and a bit violent, but he's not a villain. He is the main character of the story, and he is the guy you're supposed to be rooting for in the story. And then at the end, something happens where he gets his like comic accurate costume and he puts it on, and Russell Crowe's like, embrace who you are. You are a hunter. You are the villain, or something like that. And that's how the movie ends. So let me just say this. Those last 20 seconds are so incredibly out of line with the rest of the movie. It's hilarious. There is absolutely not a single thing in this film that led to the ending and that ending the movie. Like again, it's so weird how the movie ended on that note. Clearly, they were trying to set something up. I don't know if it was Kraven 2. If they ever thought Kraven the Hunter was going to be a huge box office success, I don't even know what to tell you. Even if this was made by Marvel Studios, no one cares about Kraven. Nobody at all cares about Kraven. So I don't mean that in like a bad way, but I'm just saying like nobody needs to see a Kraven the Hunter spinoff movie. No one wanted this, right? So I don't know what they were doing at the end of the movie tease, and there's so many strange. I guess I should get more into the actual movie itself, but the reality is this review is going to be more of an overall message about Sony and the fact that they have made all these spin-off Spider-Man movies and not of his villains, and not a single one has been good. All of them have been bad. I think my favorite of all of them will be Let There Be Carnage because it's just chaos and I like the fight scenes, but Morbius and Madame Web are terrible. Like literally there's no redeeming aspects of it. They're both terrible. And then Venom 1 is mid. I'd say all the Venom movies are just mid. They're not terrible. There's no good plot to it. Tom Hardy's a funny iteration of the character. I'm not the biggest fan of his iteration, but it's a good iteration of the character and they're fun stories. And Craven, I gave it 1.5 stars in Letterboxd, to whereas I gave Morbius and Madame Web half stars in Letterboxd out of five. So, and the reason that is because I like Aaron Taylor Johnson. Frankly, I went into this movie thinking he'd be a good Craven. I don't think he's a good Craven because watching this movie, he's just not. This isn't really if you take out like the Rhino and the superhero aspects of that, it's just an action movie. Like he's not Craven. I'm sorry, but he doesn't have a Russian accent. He barely has a Russian accent. His accent's American. He's not as brutal as Craven. He's not as sinister as Craven. He's not Craven. I'm sorry. I don't think it's his fault. I think if he got better writing, he could be a good Craven. Maybe not, but I think that's the way I see it. But unfortunately, he just does not fit the role of Craven to me. In this movie, he's not Craven. So, um, I think he's good. Like it's Aaron Taylor Johnson, so he's gonna put in some good scenes, good performances throughout. And I do think some of the action scenes are good. I was still left disappointed because pretty much every good action scene we get is or was already shown in the trailer, so I knew exactly what was gonna happen. And they made this whole thing about how this is R-rated and it's gonna be some bloody, like, gritty movie and something like no other villain-led movie they've done so far. Even I think wasn't Morbius R-rated and Venom was like teetering. Venom 3 was teetering on that, but anyway, you don't take anything Sony says at face value. But um, yeah, I think that that's really the only redeeming qualities of this movie is the fact that it's Aaron Taylor Johnson. Russell Crowe is obviously, I mean, he phoned it in a little bit, but it's Russell Crowe. He's good. And again, the action scenes were all right, and like I guess there isn't as many like terrible qualities compared to Morbius and Madam Web, but overall, the movie just has nothing going for it. The plot is messy. Some of the actors, I don't know if it's their fault. Some of the actors in it, I don't know, but some of the actors in it, like the actor that plays Rhino, is just like I don't know what's going on there. Like he's such a strange performance. There's a scene where he like laughs or makes some weird noise, and literally like everyone in the theater. By the way, nobody was in the theater, right? This is Friday. I'm recording this. I think it's coming out on Friday too, but I'm recording this on Friday, and there was like four people in my theaters. This movie's gonna flop hard and well deserved because it's terrible and Sony just don't even get me started. But there's like a scene where he like makes this weird noise, and everyone in my theater, the few people that were in it, were all like at the same time just like, what? And there was so many moments like that in this movie where you're sitting there and you're like, what? And then like moments where you're just like, come on. Like as a Spider-Man fan, as someone who's read Craven comics and Craven or sorry, Craven comics and Spider-Man comics with Craven in it. And big spoiler here. I mean, none of these are really big spoilers. Big spoiler here. Chameleon is in this movie, who's a very like at least the general public not known Spider-Man villain, but the way they introduce him in this movie is like comical. There is nothing from the first, I don't know how long this movie is. I would guess it's like 2 hours. There's nothing from the first hour and 40 minutes that shows at all this character is Chameleon. And then randomly, like in one of the second to last scene in the movie, Craven's brother is just like, I went to some doctor and he saved my life and he made me feel more powerful than ever. And I'm like, "Whoa, okay, what is that teasing?" And then he like is they're on like a bridge and this guy is just like, I've always felt like a chameleon, and then he shifts into Aaron Taylor Johnson. I'm just like, I'm literally just sitting there. I'm just like, there's no way they just did that. Like, why is Chameleon's movie? I could barely get over the fact that Rhino's in this movie. I keep having to cut myself out because I'm cursing and this is how mad I am. But I can't even go over the fact that Rhino's in this movie, and then I have to deal with the fact that like Chameleon shows up right at the end. Like, again, what were they teasing with that? Like, I guess if they were doing the Sinister Six movie, they Chameleon might have played like a small villain role, but Kraven the Hunter like 2 was never gonna happen. So randomly at the end, they're like, "Oh, here's Chameleon." Randomly at the end, they're like, "Oh, Kraven's got his comic accurate outfit, and he's on his throne and sitting like this." That photo of promotion that's going around everywhere, like the main poster of the film with him in the throne. That's the last shot of the movie. It's no part of that is teased at all before that part of the movie. And the last shot of the movie is that poster. You know why they're doing that? Because this movie isn't a Craven movie. The only reason it's a Craven movie is because some crazy Spider-Man fans like me, even with Sony's failures, will go see it and think it's a Craven movie and they'll market parts of it as a Craven movie, but it's not a Craven movie. It's not a Spider-Man spin-off movie. It's just its own terrible thing. That's all it is. And that's what it is with every single one of these spin-off movies that Sony does. And just seeing that, seeing them put the chameleon in at the end and like terrible look to like terrible CGI and terrible everything, but terrible acting, all that stuff. And then like at the end, he's like sitting on the chair like this. I'm like, dude. I don't know. I'm like, what are we like? Seriously, what are we doing? That's like I could not keep saying that. What are we doing here? And it is the most classic Sony thing ever to do stuff like this. To throw in these like random, I wouldn't say Spider-Man connections, like it's Craven connections. Like we're at the point where like not only do we not have Spider-Man in any of these movies, we're throwing Craven, like I mean, Chameleon is like not connected to Craven, but like okay, can be Chameleon, sure, come in, like sure, you want to do Chameleon, whatever, do it maybe at the beginning of the movie instead of like throwing them at the end and you're just never going to see that character again. And the thing that sucks about this is that these characters Sony is using, the Cravens of the world, the Chameleons of the world, the Rhinos of the world, the the Madam Webs, the Spider Woman, Sydney Sweeney's character, like all these characters they're bringing in, Morbius, unless the deal between Sony and Marvel Studios changes, we're never going to see these characters for like another 20 years in any MCU project. And unless Marvel just decides, screw it, we'll bring in Aaron Taylor Johnson Kraven in Secret Wars and merge the Sony timeline with in Doom's perfect world, battle world. Like unless which why would they do that? There's no reason for Marvel to have any incentive to do that. But if they did, I guess they could come back. But now it's frustrating because they're preventing these great characters that work great with Spider-Man from appearing in films for the near future. Because assuming this is the last like Sony, apart from Spider Noir and Beyond the Spider-Verse, which just seem like their own thing, and obviously TV series and animated movie, it's different than what we're doing here. Assuming this is like the last of these films, Hypno Hustler was canceled, I think, and what was the other one? El Muerto, both were canceled. So assuming this is the last one, like these line of Sony spin-off films, then it was just a colossal waste of time and genuinely barring like good characters from staying in on the big screen once Spider-Man comes back into his own and more grounded street level stories post Secret Wars, which is what we expect. So, and speaking of that, like I've already said about the chameleon thing and the Craven ending and Rhino in this movie, who's again just terrible. You will not, if you've not seen this film, you don't plan to. Again, this is going to be a spoiler right here, so but you will not believe the Spider-Man connection they make in this movie. Just when I think that Sony cannot top themselves in terms of embarrassing Spider-Man references in these movies, we saw it in Morbius, like in the trailer that showed, I think it was Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, like a poster, and then just cut it out of the movie, and then like Michael Keaton's Vulture's in there somewhere, and like what was going on with that, and then Madam Web, like you got Uncle Ben is in it, and they're teasing Peter being born, and then Venom 3, like we think that might be younger Peter Parker that he's protecting, like all this stuff. Just do you think they can't top that? The connection in Kraven, the sole connection to Spider-Man in Kraven. I mean, this is like you can't even like this is hilarious. Is the fact that Kraven is afraid of spiders. Kraven is scared of spiders. Peak cinema. Peak cinema, Sony. I mean, you really got me there. That's great writing there. There's a scene where he gets hit by like this tranquilizer dart by this another random character that I don't even know who that was supposed to be. This like shifter guy. I thought that was going to be Chameleon, but apparently it wasn't. Um, he gets hit by this dart and he starts to have this like hallucination and these spiders crawl over him and he just goes, "Oh no, no, get these spiders off me." And they start it's in the trailer, there's a shot where like they're all falling like from the sky. I think it's in the trailer. They're all falling from the sky and like he like I don't know, he's looking around at all of them and then like I guess we get like a quick flash of his mom who we learn dies like early in his childhood and she's like, "No, not the spiders, not spiders." And that's it. And the scene ends and we never talk about that ever again. That is the lone Spider-Man connection in the Kraven the Hunter movie, is the fact that Kraven is afraid of spiders. I, what do I even say anymore? What do I even have to say about Sony at this point? Like, that is just the stupidest thing I could possibly imagine. That is something that you'd make as a joke leading this movie. You'd be like, "Oh, I wonder how they'll connect this one to Spider-Man. Maybe Kraven will be afraid of spiders." Like, and I would be like, "Yeah, it's hilarious. That's something they probably would do." And they did it. That is something they would like is the most Sony thing ever. And they've made all these Spider-Man movies, spin-off Spider-Man movies that they're considered like the Spider-Man universe, and none of them have anything to do with Spider-Man, just random connections here and there. Like Uncle Ben is here in Madam Web, and oh, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man might be in here, and Michael Keaton's Vulture is in Morbius, and oh, something to do with Spider-Man, I think. Like it is just a mess of colossal proportions. And this Sony spin-off universe, if this is really it, if Craven is really it, this has been the biggest waste of some great characters and great actors of all time. I mean, listen, I mean, think about the actors they got to play I mean, these actors must have thought they were playing a Marvel Studios movie because there's no reason they would have agreed to it otherwise. But like, think about the actors you're getting these movies. Aaron Taylor Johnson, Russell Crowe, Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, Isabel Merced, Celeste O'Connor, Jared. I don't really like Jared Leto, but Jared Leto, who's an Oscar winner, Tom Hardy, Woody Harrelson, who was in Last Dance. Gee, I can't remember. That movie is just so forgettable. But if I think of anyone else, I come to it. But like these are Riz Ahmed and the first Venom. Like these are great actors. These are good actors who I feel like wouldn't sign on. They Sony must hand out bags, especially to Tom Hardy for play Venom for 3 movies. But and Aaron Taylor Johnson agreed to this, but I don't know what it is. And like Aaron Taylor Johnson in the press for this movie said that, like, I know he like has to say this because he's in the movie and stuff, but like he seemed to like think this was a really good role and this was a good film that was going to be a standalone film and people could just watch it and enjoy it. That's what he seemed to think. And my point is that all these great actors sign on these movies and they were all just terrible. And it's a waste. It was just a waste of however long from the first Venom movie to where we are now. Again, if this is the end, it's just a colossal waste of time for everyone involved, for the fans, for the actors, for the characters, for every and the writers, the directors, like every single person involved with this should be fired. Every single person involved with making these movies. And I don't blame the actors because to me, they probably just signed on for a paycheck and they were doing the best they could with the script. I mean, some of them made the characters worse, Jared Leto, but I I I think that the only people to blame here are the people that signed on to these movies, which is Sony Pictures. And listen, I'm not trying to get like a letter from Sony in the mail, and I'm never going to be invited to a Sony premiere ever in my entire life, but I don't know how the same studio that made Into Across and eventually Beyond the Spider-Verse, which the first two were like near perfect, if not perfect movies to literally everybody who's seen them. And they like transcend the Marvel movie like fatigue. Like even people that I know that don't like Marvel movies loved Into and Across Spider-Verse. But the fact that that studio that made those two films and made No Way Home, or partly made No Way Home, and I don't really like the first two Tom Holland movies, but those like made those two and made the Amazing Spider-Man movies and made Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. Like the fact that that studio can make these movies of slop that they've made the last couple, I don't know, whatever, 5, 10 years, it's just hilarious to me. And again, Craven is just, I'm just getting for I can't like I'm getting flustered because like I don't even know where to start with all this, like or where to start or end with all this stuff. Like all you need to know about Craven is that if you didn't like Morbius, if you didn't like Madam Web, if you didn't like Venom 1, if you didn't like Venom 2, if you didn't like Venom 3, I don't think I'm leaving anything out, then this movie will be the exact same. And I haven't seen anyone like with all these movies, this is the case, but I haven't seen anyone go into this movie so far and be like, you know what, it's not great, but this is like a Venom review would be like, it's not great, but it's fun and there's good parts of it. I haven't even seen that. I mean, this movie started at 9% Rotten Tomatoes. Like, I think this is like I think people are equating this to Madam Web Morbius level. I mean, it's comparing it to the lowest bar possible, but I think it's slightly, I mean, based on my reviews, but I think it's slightly better than Madam Web and Morbius just simply because of the action. Like the action scenes are actually all right. Again, it was ruined to me in the trailer. And maybe if I thought about this movie more, I'd move it down from 1.5 stars. But I think that alone and Aaron Taylor Johnson again does not fit the role to me, but he's still good in the movie. Like he's a great. I love Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's still good in the role, and there's good actors in the cast. The name of the Calypso actor is escaping me, but she's good too. And so like that makes it a little bit better than Morbius Madam Web, but they all suck. They're all terrible. There's not many redeeming qualities, and I hope we're done. That's the reality of this. I don't know when I'm gonna end this, maybe soon, but I don't want to do this again. I don't want to see a trailer for there was like a rumored Agent Venom film in development after Venom 3. There's a rumored Silver Sable movie. The Silk series has been thrown around. Um I'm talking about non like animated stuff. And like let's just not. Like and I don't think we will considering that like we've gone the Venom movies always make money because it's Venom and people support that brand, but Morbius, Madam Web, and Craven were all critical and commercial flops. And not only were they critical commercial flops, they were like embarrassments. Like people made fun of these movies. Madam Web got made fun of at the Oscars last year. Like these were movies that are like make Sony out to be a joke. Like that's what I'm doing right now. It's making Sony to be a joke for making these movies. So I can't see them moving forward with anything else besides some Spider Noir, which is already filming, and Beyond the Spider Verse, obviously, which will Beyond the Spider Verse will obviously be a huge success for them. So go ahead, hey Sony, go do that. Make Beyond the Spider Verse and make spin-off animated movies. Go ahead. That sounds awesome to me. That'd be amazing. Great. Make Amazing Spider-Man 3. Do that. People would love to see that. Make another Tobey Maguire movie. People would love to see that. Like, people are always going to watch the Tom Holland movies. Like, help with that. But do not keep continuing. And I'm pitching to a movie studio right now if I know anything, like I know anything about making movies, but do not continue to make these Morbiuses, the Madam Webs, the Cravens. I know I keep saying that over and over again, but just this is pointless. Making these movies is pointless. I'm part of the problem. Me going to see this movie and talking about it is part of the problem because people are going to want to see it now just to see how bad it is. That's basically what I'm doing. I mean, this is like something I do for a hobby, and I like watching these movies. So like, and I can go for free with my MC Stubbs thing. So, I'm going to go see it anyway because I'm just a sicko. But and so I know I'm part of the problem, but I'm gonna, you know what? I'll say this actually. Don't go see this movie. Do not go see Kraven the Hunter. Because if you do, and if this somehow becomes somewhat of a box office success, this will keep happening. And we need this to stop. We need this to be over. I don't want to see any more. I don't want to see a lizard movie. I don't want to see a vulture movie. I don't want to see a Sinister Six movie. I don't want to see any of that. Just get rid of this idea, right? Make this movie flop. If you see it, trash it on reviews, and please do not let this happen again. This cannot happen again. And again, I feel awful for Aaron Taylor Johnson that he has to be part of this. Dakota Johnson, they feel awful for having to be part of this. I don't feel bad for Jared Leto, but all the actors that are involved in all these movies, especially these three, let's just put aside the Venom movies. I feel bad that they all had to be a part of this. I genuinely feel bad about it, and I keep going on about this for hours, but I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed. In what I was saying. Oh, by the way, the dialogue in Kraven the Hunter, it's like AI generated. I think the script was genuinely like they typed into Chat GPT and they were like, write me a Kraven the Hunter script, and that's what they wrote the script. Like again, the actors are trying their best, but there's some scenes where you're just like, what was the ones? There was a scene where it won't make any sense without you seeing the film, so it doesn't matter. But there's a scene between like two of the main characters, Kraven being one of them, and I'm watching it and I'm just like what? Like the settings lines of dialogue back and forth, and I'm like, this literally feels like AI. Like it feels like this movie was made using AI, which wouldn't surprise me, by the way. I'm not claiming that at all, but it wouldn't surprise me. But like the dialogue in this film is awful. Like it Morbius and Mad were the same thing. The Venom movies aren't really like that, but like in this movie especially, like I was like, this is what drags down the movie a lot. Like there's no crisp dialogue. Again, just strange performances from some of the actors, especially the Rhino and his brother who ends up becoming the chameleon. Just like I think they're good actors, but like just like in strange. It was the same thing as Madam Web. It's like these are good actors putting in like very weird performances, which at the end of the day, it makes you just realize that the script must be terrible because these are good actors. They shouldn't be performing in this way in a movie. But I just like very strange watching some of these scenes. I'm just like, something's off here. Like, and that equates to reshoots too. Apparently, this movie had a lot of reshoots, and that is clearly felt throughout the movie, which is how it's paced and stuff. But yeah, it is fitting. Just to cap this off, it's fitting that this is the final film of the Sony spin-off universe because they're not going out with a bang, but a simple whatever. That's what it is. And not even whatever, but a terrible, like a terrible movie. That's what they're going out with. And, you know, I don't know if this is going to cause Sony to adjust that deal with Marvel, where Marvel will just have the rights to Spider-Man, and I'm sure they could get a lot of money out of it. I mean, Spider-Man is like the biggest superhero brand right now. I'd argue. I mean, we'll see what happens in the next couple of years with the DC characters like Superman and Batman if they come back onto the main stage. But and we'll see all Fantastic Four and all those more and the X-Men and all those characters coming back in. But I'd argue that Spider-Man is the biggest superhero brand right now, and we've seen it with No Way Home made so much money. I think it made almost $2 billion in a pandemic. So Spider-Man 4, can't wait to see how much that makes. But anyway, I'm sure they get a lot of money if they made a deal to just sell all the rights back to Marvel, and Marvel post Secret Wars can make their own Raven, make their own Doc Ock, make their own Green Goblin, make their own um Morbius if they want, stuff like that. So, if that happens, great. I don't see it, but this is just again the only way I figure to describe it is a colossal waste of time. These every single one of these movies and the actors involved and the creators of it was a waste of the fans' time. And if this is it for the Sony Spider-Man movie universe, good riddance because I don't think there's really any redeeming qualities from this universe. And some people may look back at this one day and be like, "Oh, we hated on them too much." They were fun movies. They weren't good, but they're fun. Like people what people always do with OG movies, like the OG Fantastic Four movies and the Blade movies, aside from the first one. Like people go back and they're like, these are underrated. We should have never hated these. But no, these movies are just bad. These are bad movies. And for for every whatever like mediocre Venom movie we got a Morbius, which was terrible. We got a Madam Web that was terrible, and now we have a Kraven the Hunter, which is also terrible, even if it's the best out of those three. Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess this is where I'm going to end this. Uh, if you want to just have a good laugh and a good rant with yourself, then maybe go see Kraven the Hunter, but I wouldn't recommend it. Don't help Sony out. I hope this movie critically and commercially flops, which it seems like it already is. They're in the box office. The box office numbers. They're gaining less money than uh Morbius and Madam Web did in previews, and we'll see how Friday does, which is today. But yeah, I would not recommend this movie. Sony is a disaster. Craven is disaster. And please, 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 please sell those rights back to Marvel Studios. Let's get a real Spider-Man story fighting against Craven. Let's get Craven's last hunt. And what you know what? Even bring back Aaron Taylor Johnson. I don't think he was great in the role, but I think with better writing, a better costume, more direction, and less of this Sony like BS, bring him back. Why not? Bring back Dakota Johnson's Madam Web. Why not? Bring back Sydney Sweeney and Spider-Woman, like Jessica Drew. Like do all this stuff, sure. And if they want to do that, go ahead, but not under the Sony banner. Sell it all the way back to Marvel Studios, and you can bring these characters back post Secret Wars when everything's in the same timeline. But maybe that's what they're planning on doing. Maybe that's like maybe Sony sees this Secret Wars reboot, or what we're expecting to be a kind of reboot. Maybe they see that as a way, just what, cut our losses. We'll get a lot of money for it, and maybe we'll buy a character off them at some point, a bigger character. But yeah, that's what I hope happens. I don't see it happening. I think Sony's probably gonna go back to making these kind of movies after Secret Wars, but that's way in the future. But yeah, Craven, just a colossal disappointment. And so thank you guys for listening, watching on YouTube or Spotify. Again, sorry for the just complete mess of an episode this was. It's fitting because of how much of a mess Craven was. And yeah, gonna try to be more active with movie reviews, but this is just something where I had to turn on mic and rant about basically. So thank you for listening. I've been Alex Schlerf, and yeah, I will see you when I see you.